This is the video from Module 12, and moving right along, we are actually going to skip Chapter 12 of the Spring Book. Chapter 12 in the Spring Book deals with media and popular culture and how it's always sort of played a role in education, and it's a very interesting chapter. So please go ahead and look over it, but I'm not really going to be testing you or quizzing you on any of the information. But it is indeed an interesting look back on how movies and radio and television and all of these magazines, print, all of that kind of stuff has influence. I think a lot of us believe that, with the age of the internet and so forth, that and round-the-clock TV, that has really made a big influence on education, which it has. But it is important to understand that it's always played a role. And there's always sort of been a battle for the attention of children and teens, and what kind of responsibility should media have, and should popular culture and movie makers and such. That has constantly been debated over the last 100 years or so, So anyway, it's an interesting, look. But again, I'm not going to test you on any of it. So we're going to move into Chapter 13 instead. And that's on the Cold War and poverty. Lots of interesting stuff in that chapter. And honestly, we're getting to a time in history that's really relevant to, today, now that we're moving into the 1950s or so. And I guess the big things in that one is they talk about, Spring talks about the influence of the SAT and the Educational Testing Service that comes about, I believe, in 1947. He talks about, Gunnar Myrdal and his, the social science research that he came up with about, the cycle of poverty. And so Lyndon B. Johnson basically has a platform, a former teacher, Lyndon B. Johnson, a former teacher, a platform to try to wipe out poverty, because he understands, as a former teacher and then now as president, how much of an effect that has on a child's education. So definitely for this particular PowerPoint, I've embedded, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 little clips and videos to go along with this one. So this one is definitely one to watch in slideshow mode, so that you can click on the little links. But anyway, so they talk about, he talks about Sputnik, and when the first satellite goes up from Russia, and it's sort of like the butterfly that flapped its wings, or it's heard around the world or whatever. When the first satellite goes up in Russia, the effect it has on the United States and ultimately on education is pretty incredible. I know that a lot of people wouldn't think there's a link there, but there is, and it's a pretty significant one, because the NDEA, the National Defense in Education Act, something like that, I can't remember the actual, but it comes out in 1958, and it's a direct response to the 1957 launch of Sputnik. And it was basically, oh no, Russia's so far ahead of us in science and technology. What are we going to do? Should we blame the military-industrial complex, or the science, science people? Or no, we should blame education. Let's blame the public schools, because they're at fault for why. I'm joking about it, obviously tongue-in-cheek right now, but honestly, this is what happens. We blame the schools. So, Spring talks a lot more eloquently than I about this in that chapter, so it is important to read. But the ultimate thing you should probably take away from this is that this is when federal control really starts to take hold in this country. States, local districts have been pretty much left alone with regard to how they want to control education, but you're really going to see it start to be stepped up in 1958 as a result of the NDEA. And then, of course, in 1965, a few years later, as a result of Johnson's war on poverty and a lot of his legislation, the Civil Rights Act, the Immigration Act, these are all in 1964, 1965, during that pivotal, period of history, when, the country is really trying to help the less fortunate, and trying to create more equal opportunities for people. So you've got the ESEA, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and that comes about in 1965 originally, and has been reauthorized, I don't even know how, every so often ever since. One of the latest reauthorizations of that was the 2001 legislation called No Child Left Behind. So this is where you get, if you hear about Title IX, or if you hear about a Title I school, this is where those things come from. It comes from that original legislation for the ESEA, back in the 60s. And Title I basically provided extra funds for high poverty schools. So it's important. This whole chapter is really, really good at sort of framing a lot of the history of what we're dealing with right now. And, it talks about Head Start, which is an early education program, which is something that, Ravitch has said we need, right? It was implemented back then, and honestly, all the research has shown that the impact of early childhood education on equalizing the achievement of children across the board, with regard to socioeconomic status and with regard to race, is or ethnicity, is remarkable. That early childhood intervention is something that just works. However, we did just have a recession recently, and one of the first things to go is usually a lot of these, extra services. And, Head Start has been cut in many budgets over the years, not just Republican budgets, not just Democrat budgets, with both parties. So, that's definitely something that you should know about. And then I think it also talks about Sesame Street and the history of how that began. And it really began as a way to try to, again, equalize the early learning of children through using TV. So again, click on some of the links, because I have a lot of little embedded videos that kind of give you a little history lesson. Okay, so number 2, what's the next thing you'll do? You'll finish reading Ravitch. We're finishing up her book. We're reading chapter 33, which I think is her last solution, and then the afterword. And, it's the afterword, I think, is pretty long. I don't remember how many pages it is, but, it's time to sort of reflect on Ravitch and her solutions and what you thought about her book and about what she had to say about, improving education and closing achievement gaps and increasing equality of opportunity. So I don't remember where I have it. It's probably in the discussion prompt that I address this, but I don't remember. It's going to come up eventually, I promise. But reflect on Ravitch, what you thought about her, and some of the ideas that she had to offer. So you'll do the discussion prompt. You'll take the number 6 quiz. What else? And then your education issue paper is due. It's due this module, so it's due by Sunday at midnight, okay? And then, of course, the next week will be when you'll create a presentation. I can't remember how many slides I told you it had to be, but I think it's 8 to 10 slides or something like that. But look at the sheet for it, because I don't remember specifics. But you're going to create a PowerPoint or Prezi or some sort of presentation that you can upload and show your classmates as well, because that will be coming up soon as well in the next module. So anyway, that's it for Module 12, and I will see you again in Module 14.